So yes, I think checklists are good because, and I'm sort of a bit of a checklist. I'm reading a lot about it. That's been part what generated that newsletter is reading more and more and doing more of that, because even though if it can take a little more time up front, it can save you more time afterwards. And what's interesting is there are a number of services, and I mean I'll speak to it just because it's a tool available. We subscribe to something called GMI, and they have scorecards, governance scorecards, but also accounting scorecards. And it can be very mechanistic, and they rank it and decile it, and it's versus peers, and you can argue about who the peers are or whatever. But what I like about it is the same thing with the governance scorecard, or ISS will also do this, and the accounting scorecard is it forces us to sort of say, based on this random mechanistic thing that you may or may not agree, this is what it looks like. It looks like it's very aggressive accounting. And here's why. And there's a laundry list. And going into doing the work, or after you've done the work and you do this, you apply this, you go back and you say, how come that share dilution count seems to be awful high for the kind of business that it is? Are they being too generous with the options? Or on the accounting, well, it looks very aggressive relative to its peers, but their business model is different in this fundamental way. That's why their metrics look out of whack. So it's not really that it's aggressive, but it's more that it's an outlier, right? And you're always going to have outliers. So you need to understand if it's an outlier, why? Because that's where the opportunity can be and where the controversy can be. And again, with conviction, not that I like to get into holy wars with shorts, but shorts can do good work. And if you own something that's heavily shorted, you want to really understand why. Because if you have conviction on why it's worth going long, the short interest adds fuel and it's good. On the other hand, you could say, yeah, these shorts are right. I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot ball, right? So there are even sort of research products, I guess is what I'm saying, that sort of provide a checklist, and it's a nice support to just say, hey, this is what looks funny on them. So I like to use, for somebody who's very qualitative and very conceptual, I also like to really ground things in quantitative metrics, and I'm a data geek too, and I think you need both. Because if you just live in the realm of data, you need large numbers. You need to have a lot of positions. You can't run a concentrated portfolio, I think, in my opinion. And on the other hand, if it's all soft, loosey-goosey qualitative stuff, you're inevitably going to overpay for things. And because you could see that, hey, dream big, there's this huge opportunity and a huge upside, but you have to make sure that you're, that your downside, you're not overpaying for that potentiality in today's, you have to discount that properly. So I think checklists are really helpful to go through everything that you need to go through. What you're talking about with mind mapping, and this is a technique that I think they teach fourth graders or something when they're learning how to write, and it was something where along the way in my education, I thought, well, what is this? This is ridiculous. But what it is and I actually do write the newsletters this way, you sit down and you do a brain dump of what you're thinking and how everything is connected together. And so we actually have 4 walls here at the office where I put something called idea paint on it, and it makes your walls into a giant whiteboard. And so we're forever writing on walls, or certainly I'm forever writing on walls, because you can think about it and it's big and it's right in front of you. But I use the mind mapping to think about the business model and the mental models more than the numbers. So the spreadsheets are really great, and understanding all the levers and the drivers of operating leverage are really great. But it's important to take a step back oftentimes and say, how does this business really work? And I'll actually map it all out. So what are the inputs in terms of what drives them? What are the distribution? But it's just mapping it all out and thinking about the how cash sort of flows through the enterprise. It helps to understand drivers that you might not otherwise think of, because numbers are very seductive because they're very precise. But numbers are an imprecise capture of reality, right? Because what is business but a bunch of people interacting with a bunch of other people, vendors and customers, and they're making things happen every day. It's like performance art, right? And what happens every day gets translated into numbers in a not entirely unambiguous way, as we all know accounting can be. There's a lot of, there's ambiguity in accounting, right? You're trying to capture reality in numbers, but numbers are not reality. Right? So when you stop and you think about how does this business work, it just helps to I think it's important to have a conceptual framework of the business, and mind mapping it out by writing it on the walls really helps. And sometimes too, just even talking through the investment case and making connections around what needs to happen, it helps us to create almost like a word problem in terms of, okay, we need to solve for these sensitivities in the in the spreadsheet, in the model, and that gives us an insight as well. So sometimes our investment insights are really derived from when we see, and again, building a model is an art, and doing it well, because there's a lot of sloppy bad models out there. So the model can give you the differentiated point of view, can give you that conviction, right? But at the end of the day, the model is only going to generate numbers that people have created, and so you need to have a sense of what's going on with company managements and why they're doing what they're doing, how they think, and what's going on. And I'm thinking there's another aspect of mind mapping that is helpful. So I'll give you a couple of other examples, because I've talked about this with some of our younger analysts who are 3 years out of banking or the sell side. And it's even, and it sounds really dopey, but I tell you it works. See, if this business were to disappear, vaporize overnight, would there be any disturbance in the force? Would it matter? Who would step in? Who would take care? Who would be upset? Who would be? And I will give you an example of this, because I know Oliver said, give us examples when you're talking about this. So, and this goes way in the way past. Chico's, which is specialty apparel retailing. This was back in the 90s, and they had brought in a CEO who went too floral and too dowdy and went into not so great real estate locations. They brought in another CEO. She started to turn around. Comps went up. She started to turn it around. But then the clothes got too skinny and midriff bearing because she was a size 0, and the market are women who wanted to not bare their navels because they were of a certain age, and blew it again. And then the founders came back in, and this is, I will reduce this to an anecdote because there was a lot of work that went into this, but when I went to visit I went to visit them, and I was in the CFO's office, and he literally had a stack of letters from customers. And this is the late 90s, so people were maybe more willing to use snail mail than they are today. But I have to tell you, when people go through the trouble of writing, and this was a very small chain at the time. I mean, if they had 50 stores, that was right. It meant that because they had an interesting culture in the stores. I mean, people loved the stores and how they had nowhere else to go. That they were so ticked off that they would take time in their day to actually write a letter, and that they cared enough to do that, told me on one level, right, that all you had to do is give her what she wants, because she has nowhere else to go. Because if she did, you wouldn't have gotten a letter. She would have just been shopping there, right? So that's a small example, but that's the kind of thing that matters.